This is the Content Marketing Podcast, episode number 120, Leveraging Niche Networks, an interview with oilpro.com's Joseph Triepke. Hello and welcome to the Content Marketing Podcast. This is the show where we help you attract and retain business through the power of quality content. I'm your host, Rachel Parker of Resonance Content Marketing, and today is April 30th, 2015. Hello, and thank you for joining us today for episode number 120 of the Content Marketing Podcast. Just a reminder, we are live on iTunes and also on Stitcher. So if you're listening to this episode on the blog, you can click right over and subscribe. So you'll get new episodes automatically delivered to your listening device of choice. And if you use a different app for your podcast listening pleasure, we also have an RSS feed, and I will provide that link in the blog post. Before we get started, I want to give a shout out to our listener Ian Leahy, otherwise known as the Tech Marketer. I got a very nice tweet from Ian where he mentioned that this podcast is a regular feature of his morning commute. So Ian, I want to thank you for your tweet, and I wish you a very safe and enjoyable commute this morning. Last week, we continued our month-long focus on video content with some solid advice on creating a script for your next video. If you happen to miss that episode, feel free to click on over to iTunes or to Stitcher or to the RSS feed and get all caught up. This week, we're putting a spotlight on niche networks, and we'll be getting some insights from oilpro.com's Joseph Triepke. But first, it's time to check in with our news feed for this week's rundown of news you can use. Oh dear, they are at it again. When I say they, I mean, of course, Facebook. Yes, they are tweaking that algorithm of theirs yet again and have announced some new updates. Apparently, they were receiving some complaints that people were missing updates from their close friends and relatives and people they want to hear from. So the algorithm update is going to give posts from closest connections higher priority in every user's newsfeed. Now, I thought they were doing that already, but apparently they were not. So they are giving those posts from close friends a higher priority. Now, what does that mean for those of us marketers who are trying to get our messages heard on Facebook? The only mention in the announcement was that how it affects pages, quote unquote, will vary. So I got to tell you, folks, I'm over this Facebook thing. And I get it. I mean, people do not go to Facebook to see messages from marketers or even to get helpful information from marketers. Most of them go to check in with friends and family. And as a marketer myself, I am pretty much resigned to the fact that anything I put out there on Facebook is going to be seen by no one unless I promote it, unless I put some dollars behind it. That's just the way it is. And I laughed when I saw this latest update. It's like, oh, you're going to take my sucky reach and make it even suckier? Okay, fine. Instead of three sets of eyeballs on a particular post, I will see one or maybe zero. So, I'm kind of over it. I'm over the whole Facebook thing, and I've kind of accepted that unless you put some money behind those posts, they are just not going to be seen by a whole lot of people. So that is my jaded take on this whole Facebook update. So anyway, if you want to know more about this, I know Mari Smith had a very good blog post if you want to know more about those Facebook updates. Okay, Twitter has also announced an update. They are kind of revising the way that direct messages are handled. Apparently nowadays you can opt in to receive direct messages from anyone. So if you're familiar with the whole direct message thing on Twitter, you can only send a direct message to someone if they follow you. So I could only send Mari Smith a direct message if Mari Smith follows me. And I think that's to prevent, very, very famous tweeters from getting a whole lot of direct messages that don't mean anything. And another update is that you can send a reply direct message to anyone who sends one to you. So if someone sends one to me, because I follow that person, I can send a reply to that person even if they don't follow me. So that's another update. All that having been said, I generally don't use direct messages a whole lot. They tend to be kind of a haven for spammy tweets. I find that the spam kind of tends to stack up, and every once in a while I'll get a direct message that actually means something. So I don't know how opening it up is going to fix that situation. And I know a lot of people who are like that as well. I've DM'd people on Twitter and not heard from them for a few weeks, and then when they finally see it, they say, "Oh, I never checked my DMs because of all the spam." So, we'll have to see how that shakes out with this new update from Twitter. Okay, one more update, flipping back to Facebook for just a moment. Facebook is introducing a new feature called Domain Insights. And so what they're going to be doing, they're going to be adding a feature to the insights that we know and use on a regular basis. And it's going to include when people link to your site in their Facebook status messages, clicks on social plugins such as the like or share button, and other interactions. So this is going to give you details on when and how people actually click to your site from Facebook. So I think it involves including a code on your actual homepage or on your actual, tweaking, putting in some code so that I am not using the right words here, so that it dings Facebook when that link actually happens. Domain Insights are all going to include some demographic information so you can better optimize your sharing with your content audience. If you would like to know more about this, I'm going to share with you a very long URL. It is developers.facebook.com/docs, DOCS, /platform insights, one word, /domains. Or, of course, you can go to Google and just Google Facebook Domain Insights, and that will probably come up first in your search. So very interesting. It's interesting that Facebook is making that extra leap in their insights functionality. Okay, for our content hit of the week, I have chosen a post called "The Print Magazine Hoax: 10 Overlooked Lessons on Writing Great Content." This is by Damian Farnworth over on the Copyblogger blog. And very interesting post. He starts off by talking about how, we online publishers love to mock print magazine. We talk about how print is so old school, how it's a dying industry, how it's become completely irrelevant in these days of the web, et cetera, et cetera. But one thing Damien points out is that print magazines have a lot to teach us. And he cites as evidence for this a blog post that Google put out. Actually, they put it out a few years ago. And this post included 23 questions to help you assess the quality of your content. So, we're always wondering, okay, Google wants quality content. How does Google define quality content? And these 23 questions gave us an insight into how Google makes these decisions. And one of those questions, sure enough, was, would you expect to see this article in a printed magazine, encyclopedia, or book? And then Damien goes on to use that as kind of a springboard to talk about 10 lessons that we as content marketers can learn from the world of print journalism, specifically from magazine journalism. Anyway, it was a very good post, and yes, it was in itself print-worthy, in my opinion, and I will give you a link in the blog post for this episode. That's it for this week's update. If you stumble across something you think might be of interest to your fellow content marketers, please shoot it on over to us so that we can share. Now it's time for this week's Spotlight segment, Leveraging Niche Networks, an interview with oilpro.com's Joseph Triepke. In today's Spotlight segment, we're actually going to be covering a topic that I've been wanting to talk about for a while, and it has to do with a trend that I've noticed in the content marketing world, and that is that as mainstream networks, as the Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn, as they become more and more crowded, users are finding it harder and harder to find a targeted experience. The avid photographers are finding it harder to get that targeted experience around their passion for photography, and the same with professional groups. And I find that even LinkedIn groups are becoming a hit or miss. I'll find a group that just seems tailor-made for everything that I'm interested in, and then I click over and it's either, no one's posted there in a couple of years, or the whole thing has been taken over by the spammers. So, even LinkedIn groups, which has been created as this niche, this place for niches to have conversations among themselves are not working as well as they should. So as a result, I'm seeing a lot more niche networks starting to pop up and gain traction. Now, these are networks, specific separate networks, so it's not something within Facebook or LinkedIn, but separate networks that are targeted to a very specific group of people. Now, over the history of the web, or of the social web, let's say, there have been many niche networks that have tried and failed. They just could not get traction. They could not build that value proposition that convinced people it was worthwhile to actually click away from Facebook or whatever to this specific network. And as a result, many of them have failed. But one striking exception is a relatively new network called oilpro.com. Now, as you know, I am podcasting from here in Houston, Texas, and it is deeply, deeply steeped in the oil and gas industry. So we pretty much everyone in this town is up on what's going on in that industry. And as a result of this, I discovered oilpro.com, and it really is a terrific example of a niche network done right. So as soon as I got involved with it, I set out on a mission to get one of its leaders here on the podcast for an interview, which brings me to today's guest, Joseph Triepke. Joseph Triepke is a finance professional with a decade of oil and gas industry experience, or as we call it down here, O&G. As an energy investor and analyst for institutions like Citadel, Guggenheim, and Jefferies, he focused on oil and gas industry research and analysis. Today, he is managing director at oilpro.com, where he oversees content created by the community and publishes his own research on oil services, equipment, and drilling. Joseph earned a Bachelor's of Business Administration in Finance from the University of Texas at Austin with honors in 2004, and currently resides with his wife in Dallas, Texas. Without further ado, here is our interview with oilpro.com's Joseph Triepke. Hey, Joseph, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Rachel. Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Happy to have you here. So, Joseph, before we launch into our content, tell me a little bit about yourself and about OilPro.
Yeah, sure. So my background is largely in the finance world. I worked for a couple of large investment banks focusing on oil and gas research, specifically oil service and drilling. So a good familiarity with the industry. And I joined OilPro a couple of years ago when before it was launched, sort of in the incubation phase. And OilPro is really it's a vertical professional network designed just for oil and gas professionals. And so I came on board to help with the content and facilitating the experience for the oil and gas professional. And we have a small team of developers, writers, and graphics artists that facilitate the website.
Okay, great. Now, I know you kind of came on when things had gotten rolling, but can you tell me a little bit about how OilPro got started?
Yeah, sure. So OilPro is really the vision of our founder, David Kent. And David has also founded another leading industry website in the past, rigzone.com, some years ago. So oilpro.com is his latest project, and it was launched about 18 months ago. And really where the idea came from is that David looked around the industry and he saw a gap in the way oil and gas was being served. I think before OilPro came around, there was really no dedicated online portal for knowledge sharing and interacting for oil and gas professionals. So, if we just take a step back from oil and gas for a moment, I think that helps to understand the genesis of the idea. When David looked around the online world, it was very clear that there was a large shift going on in the way that information traveled, the way that knowledge was shared and consumed, and that was largely due to social media, right? The advent of social media. And I think what online media, what websites did to newspapers over the last 10 to 15 years is a good analog for what social media is now doing to more conventional web-based information outlets. It's more important now for us to hear from our peers than, say, an institution. So um, that sort of broader shift we thought was relevant in oil and gas as well. And when we looked at oil and gas, we found that the conversation was really just kind of being lost on these large generic social platforms. And so we felt the need to bring and deliver industry specific features in sort of a vertical platform to create a really meaningful user experience in oil and gas.
Perfect. So if you had to sum up Oil Pro's mission, how would you encapsulate that?
Yeah, I guess the short answer is our mission is to bring the global oil and gas community together in a more robust way than has ever been possible before. Um, we see Oil Pro's mission as becoming the professional network for oil and gas folks, specifically with a focus on knowledge sharing. We want our members to be more informed than anyone else, and we want them to have a platform to share their experience and stories.
Great. And if you had to, I know you serve the oil and gas industry, but if you had to specify who your target audience is, would you have a specific group that you target?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, Rachel, because whenever we started out, I think we did have a more narrow scope. We thought, okay, well, folks that work in oil and gas, company headquarters are going to be most interested. Maybe the folks that actually work in the field delivering services or drilling for oil and gas are going to be most interested. But what we're finding is that our audience has broadened over time. It's still oil and gas centric, but we cover the entire oil and gas value chain. So from the wellhead, from the drilling of the well through transportation and production and refining, that's a very, very broad scope just by its nature and in terms of the different niches along the way. And then we've also found that folks even outside the industry that are interested in it are finding Oil Pro very useful. So by that I mean students that might be studying petroleum engineering, academics that are doing research in the field, regulators that are actually signing the laws that govern how oil and gas is explored for and developed, and reporters and analysts that cover the industry. So it's turned into anyone with an interest in oil and gas has become our scope.
Right. It's interesting, Joseph, because I met one of your colleagues, Tiffany Neal, at an event, and she was telling me about Oil Pro, and she said, "Yeah, you should get an account and you should start contributing." I said, "Well, I'm not an oil and gas person. I'm a marketing consultant." She said, "If you have something to contribute to the discussion, go for it." And it's been a great opportunity.
Well, so you're a prime example, right?
Exactly. Exactly. So Joseph, at Oil Pro, you seem to have a really strong sense of who your audience is and what they want and what they need from you. So tell me a little bit, how do you keep your finger on the pulse of your audience's interests, and how do you use that information to continually improve that experience?
Well, that's a great question too, and I think that has two elements of it or to it, right? I think the first is we have a rule in our office, and that is that no feedback is bad feedback. So we entertain everything our users tell us, and in many cases, the features that you see on the site are ideas that members have submitted to us. And so, we're still a relatively new platform. We have not been around as long as some of the larger platforms, obviously. And so because we're new, we can still be pretty nimble in adapting to what our users are telling us from us. So I think that's the first point. And then, the second is more to your point about keeping our fingers on the pulse of the industry. As a vertical industry network, it is absolutely critical for us to understand what is going on in the industry. Those issues, the key issues of the day are what make the experience, covering those issues are what make the experience on Oil Pro different than what you find elsewhere. And so we regularly meet with companies, we attend their events, we go to industry conferences. We have a presence physically in the industry as well, our staff does. And so we stay very plugged into the ideas, the news, and the developments, and we use those to guide our content strategy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was at a business marketing association lunch the other day and was actually talking to someone about, have you heard about Oil Pro? And we sat down to lunch, and Oil Pro turns out to be one of the sponsors of the event. So you guys are everywhere.
That's awesome. Yeah, we're seeing a little bit of a change. Yeah, I think we're only 18 months old, right? So, 12 months ago, we were still telling people what Oil Pro was and describing it. And more when we're at these events, people are coming up to us and saying, "Hey, so I know about you, or I've heard about you." We're not having to introduce the site anymore. We're more having a conversation about how they can better use it. So I think the word is certainly getting out, and that's a good thing.
Yep, absolutely. I know from a personal experience, Joseph. When I go to Oral Pro, I see. I mean, I look at that front page, and I consistently see interesting articles, things I don't see everywhere else. It's always very, very high quality. So my next question is, how do you keep that quality level so high? How do you monitor? How do you curate? What is your involvement in keeping that quality level up?
Yeah, well, I'm thrilled that you noticed that, Rachel, because we work really hard on that. That's one of our key missions here in the office is keeping this conversation clean. And so Oil Pro is a moderated forum. So what you see there is from the community, but we do screen it. And so the first thing, is spammers. One of the biggest, one of the most common feedback items that we've received from our members is they don't like the bigger networks because there's so much spam. And so we react to spam very quickly when it does make it onto the site. We will shut spammers down. They're not allowed. So that's the first step. We don't tolerate spam, and it is not a part of the site. The second thing we do is we have what I would call distribution tiers on the website. And so if you're on the site and let's say you have 10 followers and 5 connections, and you share something that is important to you, but maybe lower quality or self-promotional or not something that we deem relevant for the entire community, you can still do that as long as it's not spam, but only your followers will see that. Only the people you're directly connected to. So that's the first tier of distribution is anything that's shared is seen by someone's followers. And if they don't like it, they can unfollow the person. The next tier is for higher quality content. So if you share something that we deem is high quality, it will generally get approved for the list page and in some cases for our global feed. So we'll actually push that out to the front page, which is where you've seen some of that high quality content. And then for the very highest quality stuff, the extremely relevant stuff, the really interesting pieces, those go out in our daily newsletter, which goes out to over 300,000 readers every day. So that's sort of the highest level of distribution that we have, and that's where the best stuff goes.
Yeah, absolutely. Another thing I noticed is that when I do look at that front page, there's a really good mix of different voices in there. I see people from Shell Oil, I see people from smaller engineering firms, I see independent consultants, and it's really you're not hearing from the same voices over and over again. It's really a good blend.
Well, that's a great observation too, Rachel, and that's something that we've also worked very hard to cultivate. I think if we look at other industries, like say tech, for example, there is a very well-established blogger network in tech, sort of an establishment, if you will. In oil and gas, that's really not the case. There's not a history of a great deal of independent bloggers and writers, and so in many ways we've gone into the community when we've seen people with interesting profiles, and we've asked them if they'd be interested in writing. So in some ways, what you're seeing there is almost kind of a homegrown blogger network. There are a few that have written before, but in many cases, a lot of those folks that you're reading, that may be their first time to publish or their third time to publish. So I think drawing out those perspectives from the community has been something we've been very excited about.
Yeah, absolutely. And with respect to your target audience, to the industry that you focus on, a lot of people with engineering backgrounds, and let's face it, engineers are not known for their sociability. Let's just say that. But but you just there are so many great conversations going on, and this is a chatty bunch when they have something to talk about that interests them.
Yeah, and I think some of that too is just the subject matter is so interesting, right? I think if we think about an engineer, we always think about the stereotype of the guy with the pocket protector and the calculator. But there's so much more to this industry than that. I mean, the industry is so incredibly physical. The equipment that we work on in this business is so interesting. It's so detailed. It's so massive, and so there's a lot of conversations that you can have, even in a non-technical sense, that become very interesting, even to someone like me. I'm not an engineer. I don't have a great understanding of of how the physics of these machines work. But there are conversations that engineers are having that I find very compelling, very interesting. And the industry is so dynamic too, as I know you've noted, that it's so constantly changing that there's always a new trend, there's always a new development, there's always a new region we're exploring for oil in. And so it's really conducive to a conversation even among technical folks.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of the industry and the changes going through it, we're kind of in a challenging time right now with the price of gas going down, and we've heard about some layoffs and some shifts going around. How do you see OilPro playing a role in this kind of challenging time we find ourselves in?
Well, that is a great question, and it's the most challenging time I think the industry has faced since the 1980s. Very, very challenging situation. A lot of folks, including a lot of Oil Pro members, are struggling with a lot of uncertainty right now. And I think this is really where Oil Pro, it's almost kind of Oil Pro's time to shine in terms of, more than ever, folks that are working in oil and gas need information. They need accurate information from people in the know, not from outsiders. And that's what they're getting on Oil Pro. They also need a place more than ever to highlight their own personal situation. Were they recently laid off? Are they worried about stability at their company, for the future? So we are seeing actually a huge increase in terms of interest, both in information and in people trying to highlight their experience. I can give you one example. Actually, yesterday we highlighted a question from one of our members. The question was asked in our Q&A forum: "Are you looking for work?" And as of this morning, we have over 150 people that have answered that question. And it's kind of a sad commentary, but it's also, I think, it's a bit bittersweet because, a lot of these people that answered the question have been laid off within the last few months. But at the same time, this gives them a way to tell their story, get their name out there. And we're already hearing from a few of them that they've received inquiries, pretty promising inquiries, after answering that question. So I think it is a very challenging time, but I think more than ever it demonstrates the need for a place like Oil Pro.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So, Joseph, you guys have obviously been working very hard and created a wonderful product. Can you tell me a little bit about your vision for the future and what we might see coming up on oilpro.com?
Yeah, I guess so. Our ultimate vision is very simple. We just want everyone that touches oil and gas or is touched by oil and gas to be on the site. So that's millions of people, right? And I think to get there, we have a number of new features in the works that we're very excited about. We have a mobile app that's coming very soon. We started with the web-based tool, and mobile is right behind that. And so that, I think, is going to be a huge boost. A lot of folks that work in the oil field most of the day explore the web on their mobile. So that is going to be a big step for us. That's coming soon. And then we're also working to make the site more customizable. Very soon your feed will look a little bit different on Oil Pro. We're developing specific content channels that, as we talked, the industry is so broad and there's so many niches that a challenge for us is ensuring that each member sees content that's relevant to them. And so we are working on some changes to channel the flow that we have into buckets that I think people will find very helpful. So that's sort of what we're working on right now. And again, the ultimate goal is anyone who works in oil and gas, we want them on the site.
Okay, great. Well, speaking of which, I'm sure a lot of people who are listening right now would love to explore Oil Pro and be a part of it. So how do they get on board?
Yeah, the best way to do it is just go to oilpro.com, and if you're not a member, there will be a place for you to register, and you can begin growing your network from there.
Okay, wonderful. Well, Joseph, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing a little bit about Oil Pro.
Well, thanks so much, Rachel. I appreciate the opportunity, and thanks for letting us be here.
All right. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks. Many thanks to Joseph Triepke for joining us today and sharing his insights on niche networks. Again, that URL is oilpro.com, oilpro.com. I recommend you check it out if you are in the industry or if you just want to see an example of a niche network done very, very well. Also, if you want to follow these good folks on Twitter, their Twitter ID is oilpro-com, oilpro-com. If you have any questions or would like to join the conversation, I would love to hear from you, and I will provide that contact info at the end of the podcast. Now it's time for our content marketing tip of the week. Since we are on now the last day of our month-long focus on video content, for today's tip, I want to talk about syndicating your videos. You know, we all know that YouTube is so huge. It's the 800-pound gorilla, and as a result, we tend to, we'll upload our videos to YouTube and just call it done. But actually, there are many other tactics that can work for your video content and get it in front of more sets of eyeballs. And I want to talk about 3 of those specifically. Number 1, you can upload your video not only to YouTube, but you can also direct upload to Facebook, which is going to give you better reach on Facebook, and you can upload to SlideShare. Little known fact, SlideShare is not just for slide presentations and infographics. You can actually upload videos there as well. The second thing I recommend is that you link to it from your social networks, and not just at the time you upload it. So those videos that you have are content marketing assets that can be leveraged over and over again as long as they continue to be relevant. So be sure that you're linking to those videos on a regular basis. And then finally, make sure that you are linking to your videos in your e-newsletter. Remember, your email audience is your primary asset when it comes to your inbound marketing. So make sure that those folks also know what you are doing in terms of your videos. And again, remember, videos are important assets, and we want to make sure our audiences know about them and have access to them via multiple channels. Okay, campers, that is it for me today. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Content Marketing Podcast. I want to say thanks again to our special interview guest, Joseph Triepke of oilpro.com. If you like what you've heard today, please feel free to subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher or via our RSS feed. And if you really like what you've heard, please leave us a quick review on iTunes. I would so appreciate it. And I say thank you again to the many listeners who have reviewed us so far. Really appreciate it. For more information about content marketing, you're welcome to visit our website at resonancecontent.com, where you'll also find links to our pages on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and other social networks. I also want to invite you to check out our monthly webinar series. These happen on the 4th Wednesday of the month. They are complimentary to everyone in the Resonance tribe. The next one is, I'm really excited about the next one because it covers a problem that I hear from so many people. We're going to be talking about how to work with subject matter experts. So especially if you work for a larger organization, this is something that you are not going to want to miss. It is on Wednesday, May 27th, and we would love to have you join us. To grab your spot, just go to resonancewebinar.com. And I know that we have a very broad international audience here and people in many different time zones. So I do want to let you know that if you register, you will, even if you cannot join us live, you will get a link to the recording afterwards. So if you're in a different time zone, don't let that hold you back from signing up. Okay, as always, I'd like to leave you with a quote, and today's comes from one of my all-time favorite philosophers. Yes, today's quote comes from Dr. Seuss. He once wrote, quote, "Think left and think right, and think low and think high. Oh, the things you can think up, if only you try." Unquote. And I totally messed that up. I'm sorry, Dr. Seuss, but you get the point. Again, this is Rachel Parker with Resonance Content Marketing. Thank you again for listening, and we will see you again next week. Take care.